Hey guys, it's Simon here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we are doing a new comic book review. We're going to be looking at the Tarzan, the New Adventures book, but we're only going to be looking at the first arc, which is delineated by this bookmark. It's from the beginning of the story all the way to the bookmark, which is about 2/3 of the way through this book, right? So, yeah, this is written by Roy Thomas. The artist for the first arc, which is probably the best thing about this book, is Thomas Grindberg, and then Benito Gallego, who you might know from the latest Lord of the Jungle comic book series by Dynamite, does the artwork going forward after that. And there's a foreword at the beginning that explains why Benito Gallego took over, and basically it's because Thomas Grindberg was not really ready to take on the responsibility of the pace that was set for this publication. And so after he finished the first story arc, he decided to step away. Roy Thomas totally understood, and Benito Gallego took over. However, I think that there was a problem with the way that this was handled in terms of like providing it to the reader. And I will talk about that later on, right? Mostly I think I'll talk about this in the second review where I talk about Benito Gallego's story. But I will briefly mention it later on in this book, just because I want to mention how different the art styles is and how this is a bad thing, right? So, yeah, the story is actually published by Dark Horse, or this book is published by Dark Horse, as you guys can see right there. This is one of those long ways books, which is pretty standard for comic strips. And this story is actually serialized, I think, weekly on the Edgar Burroughs Incorporated website in their weekly comic section, right? So they have this digital subscription for weekly comic books. Roy Thomas does work for a bunch of those stories. I think that's basically all he does nowadays. And he works on a bunch of different ones. So he works on this new Tarzan Adventures book with Benito Gallego. He does the John Carter of Mars series, and he does that one with a great Mexican artist called Pegaso. I think his name is actually Rodolfo Perez, right? But his like artistic name is Pegaso. He's really great, and he's actually the guy that does the cover art for Calimán. He's very well known for this classic, old school, very sexy artwork, right? But he does the John Carter of Mars stuff. What else is there to know about this book? The genre or the demographic here, I would say, is adult. There's nothing too adult in this first story arc, but I don't necessarily think that teenagers or children would be interested. I mean, teenagers might be just because of the artwork, but I don't necessarily think children will be, right? And so this is pretty clearly made for adult audiences, right? The genre is men's adventure because that's just what Tarzan is, right? A jungle adventure story, you could call it. There's also a historical fiction aspect to this specific story, this first arc here. And this does not have an adaptation, and I don't think it needs one. However, there is adaptations for Tarzan overall, right? I think the most famous one is probably Disney's Tarzan, right? With the Phil Collins soundtrack. That one is amazing. That's how I learned about Tarzan. But it wasn't until I watched the John Carter of Mars movie, also by Disney, that I started reading Edgar Rice Burroughs' work, right? And the rating for this first story arc is a 5 out of 5. I think it was phenomenal. It was amazing. There were so many great things going on here. And there really is no complaints I really have about this first story arc. If we talk about the whole book in general, I do think I have some complaints, but that's not necessarily relevant to this arc, right? So, yeah, the premise of the story is that Jane has to leave the Waziri estate, right? The place where she lives with Tarzan in Africa, because her father is sickly and he might die soon, and so she has to go visit him in case that is, what's going to happen, right? And so Paul Darno, Tarzan's oldest friend and the man that taught him how to communicate like a human, he taught him French in the first Tarzan novel, brings a plane down to Africa to take, Jane back to civilization. I guess they go to England first, and then they take a boat to America because that's where her dad lives, right? But this actually doesn't go that way because in a bit of bad luck, the ship breaks down, crashes into the jungle, and Tarzan thinks that his love is lost and his best friend is dead. And so he's kind of, feeling down, but he decides to go chase down the plane to see if he can find, at least the remains of his love and his friend, so that he can at least bury them, right? As that happens, it turns out that Law has chosen this moment to make her appearance again and tells Tarzan through this monkey emissary that she knows where Jane is, or that she has Jane, right? And so Tarzan actually has to deviate his plan, go directly to Law down in Opar, and crazy plans ensue, and then eventually the Greys show up. And it's crazy, and it doesn't make any sense initially, but eventually it all clicks together, and it's really well done. And I think that Roy Thomas is an amazing storyteller, and I really love this first story arc that he made, right? So yeah, the plot line here is for the new Helium arc, which is the first arc in the story, like I said, that is basically the bulk of this book, right? So from page 7 all the way to page 67, I think, so it's 60 different strips. 67, so 60 different strips. We get told this story arc, and it opens up with Jane's dad being sick, Paul Darno showing up, they take the plane, it crashes, Tarzan is sad, Law tells them where Jane is, like I said, literally like a minute ago, this is because Law wants to marry Tarzan, right? In, I think it's the second book, Tarzan finds his way to Opar, which is this ancient outpost of the Atlanteans, because that was a thing that is part of Tarzan's mythos. Basically, in Atlantis, or in Opar, the women characters are beautiful and gorgeous and ancient beauties, right? And the male characters have devolved into monkey, right? Well, they're actually kind of like gorilla men, right? Or like, they're more human than the Mangani, which are, Tarzan's family, right? The apes that raised Tarzan, but they're less human than humans, right? So they're this kind of like nebulous monkey person, right? So something like you might imagine a Bigfoot is, right? Or something like that, right? But they're smaller. When Law finds Tarzan, who has this wild man vibe to him, but he's civilized, he knows how to speak, he's different, and he looks beautiful compared to all of the men that she knows, she wants to take him as her lover, but Tarzan, of course, is smitten with Jane. He cannot take her on, although in the book, he does hesitate for a bit. I feel like he was like, I could stay here, but he decides to go back to Jane, right, into civilization, right? And so from there, Law has basically lusted over Tarzan since then. She sees that Tarzan's mate has died, or fallen from the sky, and so she decides that this is the moment for her. She sends a little monkey to tell Nakima, Tarzan's monkey friend, that she has Jane, and so Tarzan goes to her, right? It turns out that it's a ploy, it's not real, and so Tarzan has to fight his way out of Opar, right? And Law sends the Black Numa against him, right? The Black Lion, which is awesome. It's an amazing, gorgeous giant beast. Tarzan has killed lions before. This is not really that big of a deal. The only difference is that this is bigger than before, and he manages to kill it, showing his power once again to Law, making her fall deeper in love with him, but obviously hurting her because she lost her pet, she lost her lover, or the person she wants to be her lover, and he allows him to leave, but then she sends her Bongani men after him, right? And so these guys are ape men that think that they're gorillas, but they're not, right? Bonganis are gorillas and Manganis are the apes that raised Tarzan, and these guys call themselves Bongani, but they're not. They're lesser than gorillas, but they're not exactly human, and they chase after him, they hate him deeply, and they actually kind of hate Law as well, but they follow her orders because she's powerful, right? Whatever that might be. And so they chase him through the jungle. And while this is happening, or as Tarzan leaves Opar, we get to see that Jane and Darno are not actually dead. They crashed, they managed to survive, and they're trying to move out of the jungle hoping that Tarzan will find them eventually. But what happens is that they get encountered by these ancient Greek guys, right? They might be Trojans. I can't remember if they were Greek or Trojan. I think they're Greek. And these guys are amazed because Jane looks exactly like Helen, right? Helen of Troy. And they capture her and they take her back to Troy. So I guess these guys are Trojans. I can't remember actually. I can't remember if it's the Greeks that are inside the city or the Trojans that are. I think it's the Trojans that are inside, right? Because it's Helen of Troy. So they take her to Helen. Helen is like, how dare this woman wear my face? And decides to kill her. However, Jane manages to get the upper hand because at this point Jane has lived with Tarzan, all the dangers that come with that life. And so she is able to fight this woman off. She manages to knock her out and take her clothes, right? And at this point, Jane is kind of acting as Helen in order to protect herself. And eventually, Tarzan manages to run into Greeks. He is captured by them. They think he's a crazy ape man. He tells them that he's not. They figure out a way to communicate, and then he chases after the Bongani men that initially attacked him because he figures out that there's a way to get into Helen's city, into Troy, into Helium. And so now Tarzan is inside. The Trojans are having to fight off these monkeys, and the Greeks are able to invade, right? And so there's this whole crazy situation. Law shows up again. Tarzan gets Jane again, and it's crazy stuff. It's really, really fun. I really, really enjoy it. Tarzan manages to save Jane, first from the Trojans, then from the Greeks, and then ultimately from the Bolgani. Law shows up to try to kill Jane, and Tarzan talks her down. He's like, Law, I know that you know that if you kill Jane, I would never love you, and you can't have that possibility, so you were going to leave her alone. Law capitulates. She's like, yes, that's true. I guess I will leave her alone, but you will be mine one day, right? Because at this point, Law is immortal, and so is Tarzan to an extent, and I think Jane is as well. And we get to know that the Trojans and the Greeks are also immortal because of this Atlantean stuff that they turned into their Greek city. And the Bolgani go rogue, and they try to kill Helen because they think it's Jane. The Greek guy manages to save her after Tarzan helps him, and then a peace treaty is reached thanks to Tarzan's involvement. And it turns out that Aeneas will marry Helen in order to end the hostilities. There's this big party to end the story, and Tarzan and his group move out onto the next adventure on top of some elephants, right? And I forgot the word for elephant in the ape language, but that's basically what the story is. It's great. I recommend you guys read it, even though I basically told you the key plot points, because there's a lot of nuances and smaller stuff that is really important and enjoyable that I recommend you guys check out, right? So the story is awesome. I really love the storytelling. It feels very full and dynamic, even though it's a strip, right? So there's very little information given to you moment by moment, but it looks great. It's awesome. The storytelling is phenomenal. I think Roy Thomas did a great job with it, right? So in terms of characters, we have Tarzan. He's the most important character, the character we follow the most. Secondary character would be Jane, and of course Paul is with her. Law is the tertiary character alongside Helen and Aeneas. And of course we have a bunch of different animal people or animals like the Nekima, the Numa, the Bolgani, which are actually not Bolgani, and the main character that's relevant for that faction is Zhu Buguang, who is that gorilla that I just showed you, actually. See if I can find him. It's this one right there, the one with the crest on it. And there really isn't too much else to say about the characters. I mean, Tarzan doesn't really change, Jane doesn't really change, the Paul doesn't either, Law doesn't either. The kind of interesting characters here, because they're new, are Helen and Aeneas. And I guess actually the relationship between Law and Tarzan is quite interesting in this book, so I like that. I've only read the first 3 novels in the Tarzan series, so my knowledge of the characters isn't that deep, right? Out of 24 novels, only reading 3 of them, that means I have a pretty surface level understanding of them. But I like the development between Tarzan and Law's relationship, and how clear it is that, you know, there's something there, but something that can't really happen because Tarzan loves Jane, right? In terms of world building, Tarzan doesn't really have too much going on. Jane's dad is old and nearly dying. Troy and the people here, the Greeks, moved to Africa for some reason. So somehow these people were on boats, and they ended up in a storm. The storm pushed them down deeper into Africa, and that's how they ended up here. Eventually, they found these Atlantean ruins. They built a city out of them, and because of these Atlantean things that were there, they managed to become immortal, and they managed to speak any language possible, as long as the other people that they talk to have also consumed some of this Atlantean stuff, right? Which is smoke that comes up from the ground that allows everyone to communicate effectively, right? So that's cool stuff. I don't know if this is, you know, accurate to the original Tarzan lore or not, but the Atlantean stuff is at least correct, right? Then, I mean, that's basically all there is in terms of the world building. Law has Aparians, which are these Bolgani characters. They're different from the normal ones, I think, but I don't really know enough about, you know, how that is the case. In terms of the artwork and fan service, the artwork is amazing. The inks are awesome. The coloring is perfect for this style. It looks really, really great. In terms of the characters, there's no one that's naked or anything, but obviously the characters are quite sexy. Law is basically only dressed in scanty jewels and stuff, and of course Helen is beautiful in her togas and stuff, and Jane is of course gorgeous because she is. And so you don't really get fan service, like there's no nakedness, but I mean Law is basically dressed like this the whole time, right? So that's pretty attractive. And that's basically it. I do have one complaint about, you know, the artwork here, and it's actually the same page that I showed you guys. As you guys can see, because of the way that this page is made, it doesn't fit correctly in this edition, and so there's a bunch of blank space, and I don't like that. I think that that's bad. I think that there could have been 2 reasons for this, right? Because this was originally published in a digital format, Thomas Grinberg didn't have to worry about everything being in the same size canvas, right? And so he made this image bigger because on a computer it doesn't really matter. You're gonna have to scroll sideways anyways. However, when it came time to put it in here, I think Dark Horse could have done something to make this better, right? Change the aspect ratio of some of these panels, change the layout a bit, which I understand is not necessarily the right thing to do because you want to keep the original intention, right? But if they got Thomas Greenberg to do it, I think it would have been better. And also, it's just because it doesn't work that everything fits so perfectly in these in the page size, and then this one, which is supposed to be a really awesome page, ends up being smaller than the rest because of the formatting, right? And the same goes for the next one, which sucks again because this is the fight between Tarzan and the Numa, and it doesn't look as good as it could be because it's so small, right, compared to the other parts of the story. So that's a complaint. It's a pretty small one. I mean, it's only 2 pages out of 60, so it's not that big of a deal. But when I started reading it, I was pretty upset about that because it's like, this is the big moment in this part of the story, and it's the moment that is least appreciable, right? That's hardest to appreciate because the ratio of the page is different from all the others, and I don't like that, right? I don't think that there was an easy way to fix this without having some other issue come up, so I'll allow it, but you know, it does kind of hurt a little bit, right? And ratings wise is a 5 out of 5. Even with that small issue that I had, it's so good that it doesn't really ultimately matter. I love this story. I think this was a great arc. It was a great way to reintroduce Tarzan to a more modern audience through this you know, initiative that they had here. I don't know when this started releasing, but I'm sure it was in the mid 2000s, right? 2010-ish era. Let me see if I can figure it out here. 2012, I think, is when it started serializing again. And this book specifically was published May 2022, right? So I'm not sure if there's going to be more of these, but I would like them to be, because I really like this, but I don't want to pay a subscription for the Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated stuff, because I don't really find myself interested in that many of those books, right? I just want to read this one, just because I like Roy Thomas's style, right? But it's been 2 years, and there has been no movement to make new ones, so I think it's not going to happen, right? So there is all I have to say about that, right? So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you guys once again. See you guys later.